Cole choked on a mouthful of dirt. Silence. Then a muffled rumble of thunder seeped through the soil above. He was buried alive. Panic rose with each thud of his heart in his ears. He clawed at the wooden coffin lid until his nails cracked. The air stank of damp pine and cold earth. Splinters bit into his fingertips as he fought upward. Lightning cracked overhead, sudden and fierce. His fist punched through the shallow grave's crust into open air. Rain mixed with mud on his face as he pulled himself out, buried at sunset, alive by midnight, and his daughter's life was on the line. 6 hours earlier. 6 hours earlier, golden sunlight stretched Cole's shadow long across the desert. He rode like the devil was on his heels. Dust billowed behind his horse as he raced against the sinking sun to save his daughter. If he failed, he'd lose Sadie forever. He and Jed, a grizzled old gunslinger who'd guided him straight, galloped into the frontier town of Clearwater at full tilt. Cole's heart pounded as hard as the hoofbeats. The air tasted of hot sand, leather, and horse sweat. He reined in beside the wooden saloon. Grace stood in the doorway, drying a glass with a rag. She dropped it into the wash basin when she saw Cole dismount. "Cole!" Grace rushed toward him, skirts flapping. She'd been caring for Sadie. Now terror shone in her eyes. "They took her," Grace cried, voice cracking. "I tried to stop them." Tears carved dusty lines down her cheeks. Cole steadied her with rough but gentle hands. Inside, fear and fury churned. Sadie was all he had left. "I'll get her back," he promised in a low, firm voice. Jed climbed off his horse, scanning the street. "How many?" he asked, eyes narrow under his hat. Grace swallowed hard. 4 men. They grabbed her not 2 hours ago. The leader, he had a scar across his left eye. Cole's jaw clenched. He knew only one man with a scar like that, a ghost from his past. But that man was supposed to be dead. He left a message. Grace took a shaky breath. Meet at Boot Hill by sunset, and come alone. Boot Hill, the town graveyard on the hill. Cole traded a glance with Jed. The trap was certain. Jed hissed. "Sunset's almost here." He checked the revolver on his hip. Cole's fingers brushed the cold iron of his own gun. He'd sworn never to draw it again. But this was for Sadie. For more stories like this, hit subscribe now. Cole steeled himself. "Jed, we go in quiet. You circle left behind the graves. I'll walk in up front." Grace's hand squeezed his arm. "Be careful," she whispered. The weight of a promise passed between them. Moments later, Cole and Jed rode out of town at a gallop. The last sliver of sun was dying on the horizon, painting the sky blood red. Boot Hill loomed ahead on a distant ridge. Darkness gathered with every hoofbeat. Only minutes remained until the fateful meeting at the graveyard. Were they riding straight into an ambush? A veil of night draped over Boot Hill. Crickets hushed as Cole and Jed crept between crooked tombstones. The air smelled of dry sagebrush and freshly dug earth cooling in the dark. Cole's boots pressed silent in the dust. Every sense was on edge. A shovel lay abandoned beside an open grave pit ahead. Cole's eyes narrowed. Was it meant for him? He motioned Jed to circle wide among the headstones. Cole stepped forward along the main path, palms sweating around his revolver. Suddenly, a hulking figure rose up from behind a gravestone. Big Hank. The giant enforcer cracked his knuckles. "Evening, Cole," Hank growled. The brute's voice was a low thunder. 2 outlaw goons emerged from the shadows behind him, pistols aimed at Cole's chest. Cole's stomach tightened. They had walked right into the trap. Hank's scarred lip curled in a grin. Boss said you'd come. Too bad you won't be leaving." Hank lunged without warning. Cole fired a split second too late. Hank knocked the gun aside and plowed into Cole like an angry bull. The impact drove Cole back into a wooden cross marker, snapping it in two. Pain jolted through his ribs. He wrestled with Hank's tree trunk arms as the big man squeezed, choking off Cole's breath. The sour reek of Hank's tobacco breath filled Cole's nose. Around them, gunshots erupted. Jed had opened fire on the other goons. Cole's vision sparked at the edges. He fumbled for something, anything. His fingers closed around a loose shard of the broken wooden cross. With a desperate roar, he rammed the jagged stake into Hank's side. Hank howled and slackened his grip. Cole sucked in air and shoved free. Before Hank could recover, a final gunshot cracked across the graveyard. Jed's pistol smoked in the darkness. Hank staggered, a red stain blooming on his shirt. The big man toppled backward into the gaping open grave with a dull thud. Silence fell, broken only by Cole's ragged gasp. Jed hurried over, panting. Two outlaw gunmen lay sprawled in the dirt behind him, neutralized. Cole rubbed his bruised neck. They had won this round. Or so he thought. He could barely recognize the gaunt, scarred man before him as the friend he once loved. Dawson sneered. "You left me to rot. 10 years, Cole. 10 years I stewed on what you did." His finger tightened on the trigger. "You owe me a debt in blood." Cole's jaw clenched. "Let Sadie go. This is between us." Dawson barked a laugh with no humor. "Between us? There's nothing between us but graves." He nodded toward the open grave Hank had fallen into. "Yours is ready and waiting. At sunset, I promise to put you in the ground. And come midnight—" He stroked a filthy finger down Sadie's tear-streaked face. "I send her to join you." Cole's stomach turned. A secret vow echoed in his mind. He had promised to never again spill blood. But now his child's life hung by a thread. He gritted his teeth in anguish. Thunder rumbled overhead. Jed's voice cut through the tension, firm and steady. "Take me instead, Dawson. You got a score? Settle it with us, not the girl." The old mentor stepped forward, hands raised. Dawson smiled thinly. "How noble, old man." In a blink, his gun shifted aim. A gunshot exploded. Jed jolted back, a dark red stain blooming on his chest. "No!" Cole shouted, lunging forward as Jed crumpled to the ground. The acrid smell of gun smoke stung Cole's nostrils. Dawson had shot Jed without hesitation. Rage blurred Cole's vision. He dove for the revolver he'd set down. In one motion, he scooped it from the dirt and fired at Dawson. The shot cracked through the rain. Dawson jerked as Cole's bullet grazed his shoulder, tearing his coat. With a snarl, Dawson returned fire. A searing punch slammed into Cole's torso. He staggered, breath catching. Hot pain spread across his ribs where Dawson's bullet hit. Cole's revolver slipped from his grip, thudding to the ground. He fell to his knees beside Jed's motionless body. Dawson grimaced at his bleeding shoulder, then tightened his hold on the crying child. He backed away into the darkness, dragging Sadie with him. "Die slow, Cole," he snarled. "I'll take good care of your little girl. Until midnight." With that final knife of words, he vanished into the gloom with Sadie, leaving Cole in the mud. Cole collapsed over Jed, rain pelting his face. He tried to crawl forward, but his strength gave out. Cold heaviness crept through his limbs. He reached a trembling hand to Jed's shoulder. The old man's eyes stared blankly at the sky. Jed was gone. Cole's vision dimmed. He toppled onto his back. The storm clouds swirled overhead. Sadie's terrified screams still rang in his ears. He had failed. As darkness closed in, a single question burned in his fading mind. Was this the end, or would he rise again to save his daughter? Rain hammered down as two locals lowered a plain pine coffin into a fresh grave at Boot Hill. Lantern light flickered on a handful of grim faces. Sheriff Briggs held his hat over his heart, squinting against the downpour. Inside the coffin lay Cole, just another drifter who met a violent end. To the townsfolk, he was a stranger. Grace stood at the graveside, soaked to the bone, her shawl pulled tightly around her. Tears mixed with the rain on her face. "He deserved better," she whispered, voice broken. But the undertaker had insisted on a prompt burial. The storm and the late hour left no time to wait for morning. Sheriff Briggs cleared his throat. "Lord, receive this soul," he muttered. Grace barely heard the words. Her eyes stayed on the coffin as shovelfuls of wet dirt thudded onto it. Each heavy drop of earth felt like a cruel drumbeat. A bolt of lightning lanced across the sky, illuminating the graveyard in stark white. In that flash, Grace thought she saw the coffin lid shift, the faintest tremor beneath the soil. Her breath caught. "Wait," she gasped, stepping forward. A deafening crack of thunder swallowed her plea. Within moments, the grave was filled. The townsfolk hurried off, eager to escape the storm and the morbid task. Sheriff Briggs gently tried to guide Grace away, but she refused to leave. Soon, only Grace remained, kneeling in the mud beside the raw mound of earth that covered Cole. The air smelled of rain-soaked clay and despair. Grace's lips moved in silent prayer, begging for a miracle in the darkness. 6 feet below, Cole's mind floated in black void and pain. He should have been dead. Perhaps part of him wished he was. But a spark inside him refused to die. In the suffocating silence, a memory blossomed. He saw Mara, his wife, as she lay dying years ago. In his fevered dream, Mara placed a newborn Sadie into his arms. "Promise me." "No more guns," she had whispered, life fading from her eyes. Cole had bowed his head and sworn that sacred oath as tears mixed with hers. Cole's eyes snapped open in the pitch-black coffin. Mara's voice and Sadie's distant cries rang in his ears. He realized he was drawing breath, stale, thin air, but still life. Dirt pressed in from all sides. He was buried alive. His heart thundered in his chest. Cole braced his hands against the coffin lid and heaved upward with all his remaining strength. The wood creaked but held. Soil poured in through the cracks, flecking his face. Panic clawed at him, but he forced it down. Sadie needed him. He would not die here. He slammed his fist into the lid again. A plank splintered. He gritted his teeth and struck over and over, knuckles splitting. At last, the coffin lid cracked open, and a rush of damp air flooded in. On the surface, Grace jerked back as the earth at her feet began to shift. She stared in disbelief as a mud-caked hand punched up through the grave's surface. Was it moving? Was Cole truly clawing his way out of the grave? With a furious roar, Cole burst from the grave in a spray of mud. He hauled himself upward, gasping for air. He sucked in the night air, which reeked of ozone and churned mud, the sweetest smell he'd ever tasted. Rain sluiced over his face, and thunder roared overhead. Grace cried out in shock and joy. She grabbed Cole's arms and helped pull him the rest of the way onto solid ground. Cole collapsed to his knees, coughing up grit and spitting mud. He was alive. "Cole! Oh, Lord, Cole!" Grace sobbed, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. He winced. Pain lanced through his battered body. His side was sticky with blood from the gunshot, but he managed a weak nod. "Sadie," he croaked, voice raw. That single word carried all his fear. Grace wiped her drenched hair from her face. Dawson took her, north, toward the old well by Black Mesa. I saw them riding out. Her words tumbled out fast. Lightning flickered, revealing the desperation on her face. Cole hunched low in the saddle as they galloped out of the graveyard. Rain lashed his face and the wind howled. He could barely hear scouts pounding hooves over the storm's fury. The world flashed white as lightning spiderwebbed across the sky, illuminating the trail ahead. Black Mesa rose in the distance, an ink-black silhouette against the stormy horizon. Cole urged Scout faster, heart thundering in his chest to match the tempo of her strides. Each jolt sent pain through his battered ribs, but he gripped the reins tighter. Cold determination drowned out the aches. The night was a blur of wet sagebrush and jagged rocks flying past. The wind carried the wild scent of damp sage and desperation. He pushed onward, teeth bared against the sting of the rain. Dawson's words rang in his ears. Midnight. A pocket watch in Cole's mind ticked down the seconds with every hoofbeat. Lightning struck a nearby ridge, bathing the landscape in eerie light for a split second. There, he glimpsed the old well and the ruins of an abandoned homestead at its side, not far ahead now. Cole's heart pounded. He was so close. But was he already too late? Midnight was upon him. A father, risen from the grave, raced the clock through a raging storm. His daughter's life hung by a thread. Would he reach her before that thread snapped? Sadie trembled beside the old stone well at Black Mesa. Dawson kept a tight grip on the rope binding her wrists. The dilapidated wooden roof over the well creaked in the storm wind. Only the distant howl of coyotes and the patter of dying rain filled the night air. The scent of wet sagebrush clung to the abandoned homestead nearby. Dawson winced as he shifted his wounded shoulder. He raised a lantern and checked his pocket watch by its light. The hands crept toward midnight. A cruel smile curled on his lips. Vengeance was at hand. A faint scuff of a boot on rock made Dawson whirl, gun up. Cole stepped out of the shadows, revolver aimed steady despite the rain dripping from his brim. He had approached from behind the ruined house, quiet as a ghost. Dawson's one good eye went wide in disbelief. No, impossible, he breathed. He recovered with a snarl, yanking Sadie in front of him as a shield. I buried you. Cole's silhouette looked gaunt and ghostly in a strobe of lightning. His voice came out low and hard. I crawled out, he said. Rainwater streamed off his coat. His gun stayed trained on Dawson, though Sadie was in the way. Sadie sobbed, the gag muffling her cries. Cole's gut twisted at the sound. He forced his focus on Dawson. You just don't die, do you? Dawson spat. Should have put a bullet between your eyes when I had the chance. Thunder rumbled softly, underscoring his hatred. Cole took one step forward. It ends here, Dawson. Let her go. His voice shook from pain and exhaustion, but the resolve in it was unbreakable. Dawson gave a barking laugh. You think you're in any position to bargain. You're bleeding like a stuck pig. He pressed his pistol to Sadie's temple. She whimpered. Holster that iron, or I finish her now. Cole's teeth clenched. A flash of agony from his wound nearly buckled his knees, but he straightened. Very slowly, he lowered his revolver and slid it into his holster. He raised his hands, palms out. Dawson's lip twitched. Toss it away. Now. Heart hammering, Cole obeyed. He unbuckled his gun belt and hurled it aside. It hit the rocky ground with a thud, disappearing into the scrub. He stood unarmed in the lantern glow. Dawson's grin returned. He leaned close to Sadie's ear. Hear that, little one? That's your daddy giving up." Sadie squeezed her eyes shut, tears spilling. Lightning forked overhead, followed by a long, low peal of thunder. Cole's eyes flicked to the sky, precious seconds ticking by. Midnight was at hand. "You want me, not her," Cole said, voice raw. "You have your revenge. Just let her go." Cold raindrops ran down his face like tears. Dawson shook his head slowly. "No, Cole, I want you to suffer." His scarred face twisted with years of bitterness. "You don't get to trade yourself this time. You don't get to play the hero." He jerked Sadie backward, positioning her at the very lip of the well. The old stone rim pressed into her back. She let out a muffled squeal, terror in her eyes. Cole's blood ran cold. "Don't!" he shouted, desperation cracking his voice. He took a half-step forward. Ah. Dawson waved his gun, freezing Cole in place. Dawson's chest heaved with manic glee. "Do you know what kept me alive in that prison hole after Abilene? The thought of taking everything from you." His voice trembled with rage. "I saved your hide once, and you left me. Now I'll watch you watch her die. Then I'll put a bullet in you and leave you in the dark where you belong." Cole's heart was breaking. He inched forward, empty hands raised in plea. "Brother, please," he begged, using the old word deliberately. "If I could take it back—" "Too late," Dawson roared. He cocked the pistol, aiming squarely at Cole's chest now. Sadie was pressed tight against the stones, precariously close to tumbling backward. Her muffled cries grew frantic. A distant bell tolled from town, faint but distinct through the night. Midnight. Dawson's eyes lit up with cruel satisfaction. "Midnight," he whispered. "Time's up." He moved his gun toward Sadie as if to shoot her first. Cole's breath stopped. In that split second, he had never known fear so stark or rage so hot. Dawson's finger tightened on the trigger. Cole braced to throw himself forward. A single gunshot would decide everything. Would Cole watch his daughter die in front of him? Or could he defy fate one final time? Bang! The gunshot cracked through the night, but Dawson's aim skewed wild. At the last instant, Sadie had chomped down hard on his arm. He shouted in pain, and the shot whistled past Cole's head. Sadie's little hand found Cole's calloused one. He squeezed it, feeling her warm, solid presence, the only thing that mattered. Grace let out a long, shaky breath of relief. Against all odds, they were alive and together. Cole drew Grace and Sadie both into a grateful embrace. They stayed like that for a long moment in the hush after the storm, hearts pounding and souls finally at peace. As the first ray of sunlight peeked over the mesas, Cole gazed toward the brightening sky. He had been to hell and back this night and earned a second chance. But as the adrenaline faded, a deep ache spread through his body and darkness nibbled at the edges of his vision. His eyes drifted shut even as he smiled, holding his daughter safe. Grace's voice came low and urgent. "Cole, Cole." His world tilted, the last of his strength ebbing. He sagged into their arms, consciousness slipping at last. Would Cole live to see the sunrise with his daughter in his arms, or would this night claim its final price? At sunrise, Grace polished the same glass behind the quiet bar. This time she looked up with a smile as Cole limped in, Sadie asleep in his arms. They were home. Enjoyed this journey. Subscribe for more cinematic tales.